I'm Allison Montgomery, 32, standing alone at my Harvard Business School MBA graduation. My eyes scan the sea of proud families, landing on two empty seats in row 7. My phone buzzes with a text from my mother. Watching Heather accept her VP promotion. So proud. Sorry we couldn't make both events. After 5 years of paying their rent, supporting their lifestyle, and sacrificing everything, they chose my sister's party over my graduation. My phone rings. Dad's calling, probably to ask for more money again. This time, my answer will change everything. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever had to make a difficult decision about family relationships, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about setting boundaries and finding your worth. Growing up as the oldest child in the Montgomery household wasn't easy. From an early age, the pattern was clear. My younger sister Heather was the golden child, and I was the responsible one who could never quite measure up despite my achievements. Our family of 4 seemed normal from the outside, but inside our home in suburban Boston, the favoritism was obvious and painful. My parents, Barbara and Richard Montgomery, never tried to hide their preference. When Heather brought home a C on her report card, they'd celebrate by taking her shopping. She tried her best, they'd say. When I brought home straight A's, I'd get a distracted good job while they scrolled through their phones. This wasn't occasional behavior. It was our family's fundamental dynamic. By 16, I was working part-time at a local grocery store while maintaining a perfect GPA. My paychecks went toward my college fund, since my parents made it clear early on that they hadn't saved much for my education. "You're so smart, Allison," my mother would say. "You'll get scholarships." Meanwhile, they started a separate college fund for Heather because she might need extra support. My weekends were filled with work and study, while Heather enjoyed an active social life. I remember one Saturday morning when I was preparing to leave for my 8-hour shift. Heather bounced downstairs announcing she needed new clothes for a party. Within minutes, my mother had grabbed her purse, canceling our planned grocery shopping trip that I'd adjusted my work schedule to accommodate. "Allison doesn't mind, do you, honey?" Mom had said. "You understand, you're the mature one." I was 18 when my father lost his job at the marketing firm where he'd worked for 15 years. Our family's financial situation changed overnight. My mother, who worked part-time as a receptionist at a dental office, refused to consider full-time employment, claiming she needed to be available for Heather's after-school activities. At 19, while attending state college on a partial scholarship, I started sending home portions of my paycheck to help with household expenses. "It's just temporary," Dad promised, "just until I find something at my level." But temporary stretched into permanent. I worked 3 jobs while carrying a full course load. My classmates spent spring breaks in Cancun. I picked up extra shifts to help pay our family's electric bill. Meanwhile, Heather continued her carefree life, failing classes and changing majors 3 times with my parents' endless understanding and support. The pattern of minimizing my achievements started early. When I made the dean's list my freshman year, my parents couldn't attend the ceremony because Heather had a minor role in a school play. When I was accepted into a prestigious internship program, my father asked if I could postpone it because they'd planned a family vacation around Heather's schedule. My college graduation should have been a celebration after years of hard work. I'd maintained a 3.9 gigapascals while working nearly full-time. My parents arrived 45 minutes late to the ceremony, missed my honors recognition, and left immediately after because Heather had a friend's birthday party to attend. They didn't even stay for photos. "We'll celebrate later," Mom promised, but later never came. After graduation, I secured a position at a financial services firm in Boston. My starting salary was modest but respectable, and I was proud of this first step in my career. Within 2 months, my parents were asking for regular financial help. "Your sister needs a reliable car for college," Dad explained. And with my job search still ongoing, that was the beginning of a pattern that would define our relationship for years. Every milestone in my life was overshadowed by some need of Heather's or my parents'. Every achievement was acknowledged with distracted congratulations before conversation turned to what I could do for them. When I received my first promotion, my mother's response was, "That's wonderful, honey. Does this mean you can help with Heather's tuition this semester?" I became the family's unofficial bank, safety net, and emotional support animal. I paid for car repairs, medical bills, and eventually, when they faced eviction after Dad's unemployment benefits ran out, their rent. All while building my own career, saving what little I could for my future, and trying to silence the voice inside that kept asking why I was never enough on my own merits. Family helps. Family became my mother's mantra whenever I questioned the arrangement. "We would do the same for you," my father would insist, though evidence suggested otherwise. When I needed surgery and asked if someone could drive me home from the hospital, both parents were mysteriously unavailable. My coworker Janet ended up helping me instead. Through it all, I maintained the belief that if I just achieved enough, succeeded enough, proved my worth enough times, they would finally see me. The MBA program at Harvard was supposed to be that ultimate achievement, the undeniable evidence of my value that even they couldn't ignore. I was wrong. The decision to pursue my MBA while working full-time wasn't one I made lightly. The program at Harvard Business School is notoriously demanding, and my position as a senior financial analyst required long hours and total commitment. But I was determined to advance my career and finally earn the recognition I'd been seeking my entire life. For 3 years, my life became an endless cycle of work, study, and brief periods of exhausted sleep. I turned down dates, missed friends' weddings, and worked through holidays. My apartment became little more than a place to store my belongings and occasionally crash when fatigue made it impossible to continue. The stress manifested physically. I developed migraines, stomach issues, and watched my hair thin from exhaustion. "Is it really worth it?" my mother asked during one of our rare phone conversations that wasn't about money. "You're working yourself to death for a piece of paper." The same week, she called excitedly about Heather's weekend trip to Miami with friends, a trip I later discovered my parents had helped finance while claiming they couldn't afford their utility bill without my assistance. Despite everything, when my graduation date approached, I allowed myself to feel hopeful. This was Harvard Business School, after all. Not even my parents could diminish this achievement. When I called to formally invite them, they sounded genuinely excited. "Of course we'll be there, sweetie," my mother gushed. "We wouldn't miss it for the world." For the first time in years, I believed them. I booked their flights using my airline miles, reserved a hotel room with my points, and even scheduled a dinner reservation at an expensive restaurant I could barely afford. I wanted everything to be perfect. The day I finally got to feel proud with my family by my side. "We're so proud of you," Dad said when I confirmed their itinerary. "This is a big deal." 3 days before the ceremony, I received a call from my sister Heather. "Guess what?" she squealed into the phone. "I got promoted to vice president at work. The announcement is this Saturday, and they're throwing me a huge party." My stomach dropped. Saturday was my graduation day. "That's great," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. "But you know Mom and Dad are coming to my graduation, right?" "Oh," Heather paused. "Well, I'm sure they'll figure something out. They can probably do both. My party's not until the evening, except the timing wouldn't work." My graduation ceremony was at 2 p.m., with events continuing until at least 7 p.m. Even if my parents left immediately after I walked across the stage, missing the reception and dinner I'd planned, they couldn't make it to Heather's celebration in Philadelphia in time. I called my parents that night. "You're still coming to graduation, right?" "Of course, honey," Mom assured me. "We've got our tickets already. Though Heather's news is exciting too, isn't it?" I allowed myself to believe them. They had confirmed multiple times. They had tickets. They had promised. The morning of my graduation, I woke to a text message that I had to read 3 times before the words sank in. Something came up with Heather's promotion party. They moved it earlier, and it's a really big deal for her career. "We're so sorry, but we won't be able to make your graduation after all. We're so proud of you, though. Take lots of pictures. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, unable to move. After everything, the years of financial support, the sacrifices, the work I'd put in, they were choosing Heather's party over my Harvard MBA graduation. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that I couldn't even cry. I went through the motions of getting ready, putting on the dress I'd splurged on, fixing my hair, applying makeup to hide my exhaustion. As I donned my cap and gown, I kept thinking they might surprise me, that they might show up at the last minute with flowers and apologies. They didn't. I stood alone among my peers, all surrounded by beaming family members. My friend Jessica spotted me and made her way over, concern evident on her face. "Are you okay? Where are your parents?" "They couldn't make it," I said, the words hollow in my mouth. "My sister had a work thing." Jessica's expression shifted from concern to outrage. "Are you serious? After everything you've done for them?" I just nodded, unable to explain further without breaking down. Throughout the ceremony, my phone occasionally lit up with texts from my parents. "So proud of you today. Can't wait to see pictures." Heather says congrats too. Each message twisted the knife deeper. They were acting as if missing this milestone was as trivial as forgetting to pick up milk at the store. That evening, alone in my apartment with the celebration dinner I'd planned canceled, I scrolled through social media to see my mother had posted 27 photos of Heather's promotion party. "Proudest day of my life," the caption read. Not a single mention of my graduation. My phone rang just as I was about to turn it off for the night. Dad's name flashed on the screen. For a brief, foolish moment, I thought it might be an apology. "Allison, glad I caught you," he said, his voice casual. "Listen, the landlord called today. They're raising the rent by $300 starting next month. I know it's a lot to ask, but with everything going on, do you think you could cover the increase? Just until things settle down." Something inside me finally broke. The financial arrangement with my parents had begun 5 years earlier, shortly after my father's extended unemployment had left them facing eviction from their apartment. What started as a temporary emergency measure had morphed into a permanent expectation that I would cover their $2,200 monthly rent, in addition to helping out with utilities, car payments, and various emergencies that seemed to arise with suspicious regularity. "It's just until I get back on my feet," Dad had promised initially. "The job market is tough for men my age." 5 years later, he still hadn't found suitable employment, though I'd sent countless job listings his way and offered to pay for career counseling. My mother had firmly maintained her part-time schedule at the dental office, claiming that increasing her hours would barely make a difference after taxes. The truth was, I'd never fully understood the extent of my financial contribution to my family until after the graduation betrayal. The day after my father's call about the rent increase, I met with my friend Jessica for lunch. Jessica worked in accounting and had always been skeptical of my family's financial demands. "I think it's time we actually look at the numbers," Jessica said, pulling out a legal pad. "How much exactly have you been giving them?" I did the math. $2,200 monthly rent, roughly $400 in utilities, car insurance for both parents at $320, plus the emergency expenses that averaged about $600 a month. "So that's over $3,500 a month?" Jessica looked shocked. "Allison, that's more than $42,000 a year, after taxes." Seeing the number written out made me feel physically ill. For years, I'd been giving my parents the equivalent of a decent annual salary, all while struggling to advance my own career and pay off student loans. "They need it," I said weakly. "Dad can't find work, and—" "Can't or won't," Jessica interrupted. "Have you actually verified any of this? Their actual expenses? Your dad's job search? Anything?" I hadn't. Each time I'd tried to discuss the details, my mother would tear up about not trusting family, or my father would become defensive about his ongoing interviews. The conversation would inevitably shift to how much Heather needed their support and presence, unlike independent, capable me. With Jessica's encouragement, I began investigating. She helped me create a spreadsheet tracking all the money I'd sent over the years against what I knew of their actual expenses. The discrepancies were immediate and alarming. The apartment they rented was in a modest complex where the highest priced units topped out at $1,800, not the $2,200 they claimed. The utility company's online portal showed their monthly bills averaged $250, not $400. Their car insurance, which I'd been paying directly, had mysteriously increased last year. I discovered they had added Heather's new car to the policy without telling me. "This doesn't make sense," I told Jessica as we reviewed the numbers. "Where is all this extra money going?" A deeper dive into social media provided clues. While claiming financial hardship, my parents had taken 3 vacations in the past year. Weekend trips they'd never mentioned to me. My mother had a collection of designer handbags appearing in recent photos. My father sported a new golf club set in a picture from Guys' Day Out. Most revealing was what I found on my sister's Instagram. Heather's allegedly modest lifestyle as a struggling young professional included a luxury apartment, regular spa days, and expensive restaurant meals, far beyond what her entry-level marketing position could support. I confronted my parents during a video call, trying to keep my tone neutral as I asked about the discrepancies. "We've had some unexpected expenses," my mother said vaguely. "Like what?" I pressed. "Your sister needed some help getting established," my father admitted after an uncomfortable silence. "It's hard for young people these days. I'm a young person too," I pointed out. "I've been supporting not just myself, but all of you." "That's different," Mom dismissed. "You've always been capable. Heather needs more support." Further questioning revealed they'd been redirecting a significant portion of my financial support to fund Heather's lifestyle. Her apartment security deposit, furniture, car down payment, and regular spending money to help her network for her career. The final revelation came when I directly contacted Heather's company through a college friend who worked there. There had been no promotion to vice president. In fact, Heather had been placed on a performance improvement plan and was at risk of termination. When confronted with this information, my parents were unrepentant. "She needed a confidence boost," my mother defended. "The party was our idea, to help her feel valued. Sometimes a little white lie is kinder than the truth." "And that was worth missing my actual, real Harvard graduation?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You have to understand," Dad said. "Heather doesn't have your resilience. She needs us more." In that moment, I realized I hadn't just been financially supporting my family. I'd been enabling a deeply dysfunctional dynamic that had consumed the first decade of my adult life. The money wasn't going to necessities. It was funding a lifestyle of deception where my achievements were minimized while Heather's fabricated successes were celebrated. I had been the family bank, but never a full member of the family. The discovery of my family's financial deception left me reeling, but it also sparked something I hadn't felt in years: anger. Not the simmering resentment I'd grown accustomed to, but a clean, clarifying fury that demanded action. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I allowed myself to consider a radical possibility. What if I stopped supporting them completely? The thought was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. I'd built my entire identity around being the responsible one, the provider, the good daughter who sacrificed. Who would I be without that role? "I think you should talk to someone professional about this," Jessica suggested gently. "This is a major life decision, and you've been in this dynamic for so long." She referred me to her financial advisor, Ryan Mitchell, who specialized in helping clients disentangle complicated financial situations. I scheduled an appointment for the following week, spending the intervening days compiling documentation of every payment I'd made to my family over the years. Ryan's office was calm and organized, much like the man himself. He reviewed my documents with a neutral expression that gradually shifted to concern. "Miss Montgomery, I have to be direct with you," he said, looking up from the spreadsheets. "The financial support you've provided your family has significantly impacted your own financial health. Based on your income and these outflows, you should have approximately 3 times the retirement savings and investments you currently have. He pulled up a projection chart on his computer screen. 2 lines diverged dramatically, one showing my current financial trajectory and another showing where I could have been without supporting my family. This difference, he pointed to the gap between the lines, represents approximately $230,000 in lost savings and compound interest over just 5 years. I stared at the number, trying to process its magnitude. That was a down payment on a house. That was freedom from my remaining student loans. That was years of retirement I would now have to work to recover. If this arrangement continues, Ryan continued gently, you're essentially sacrificing your own financial security to support 3 able-bodied adults who appear unwilling to support themselves. Over the next hour, Ryan helped me develop a formal exit strategy from my financial obligations to my parents. We drafted a timeline, calculated exactly what I could reasonably afford as transitional support, and discussed strategies for maintaining boundaries. The next step was harder, meeting with Dr. Wilson, the therapist Jessica had recommended. In her cozy office with its soft lighting and comfortable chairs, I found myself sharing the full story of my family's dynamics for the first time. What you're describing, Dr. Wilson said after listening attentively, contains many elements of financial abuse and emotional exploitation. The question isn't whether you should establish boundaries, but how to do so in a way that protects your well-being. With Dr. Wilson's guidance, I drafted a formal letter to my parents. It was straightforward but compassionate, explaining that I would be providing a final 60 days of financial support to allow them time to make alternative arrangements. I outlined the specific amounts I had been paying and emphasized that after the 60-day period, I would not be providing further financial assistance. I want to maintain a relationship with you, I wrote in closing, but it must be based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. I sent the letter by certified mail to ensure they received it. Then I waited. The initial response was dismissive. My mother called, laughing lightly. This little letter is very dramatic, Allison. We know you're upset about the graduation, but this isn't like you. When you've calmed down, we can talk about your concerns. I am calm, I replied. And I'm serious. The financial support will end in 60 days. You can't just abandon your family, my father interjected, having apparently been listening on another line. We've always been there for you. The irony of this statement following their graduation absence was apparently lost on him. When they realized I wasn't backing down, the tactics shifted. My sister called next, her voice shrill with indignation. How could you do this to them? After everything they've done for you, they gave up so much to raise us. Then you're welcome to support them now, I suggested. The line went silent before she hung up. The calls and messages escalated over the following days. My Uncle Tom, my father's brother, called to tell me I was breaking my mother's heart. Distant cousins I barely knew sent messages on social media calling me selfish. My mother posted vague status updates about the pain of ungrateful children that garnered sympathetic comments from family and friends. Through it all, I maintained the boundary with support from Dr. Wilson and my small circle of friends. Jessica came over with wine the evening my mother sent a particularly vicious email questioning whether I ever truly loved them at all. They're escalating because it's working, Dr. Wilson explained during our session that week. Every time guilt has worked in the past, it's been reinforced as an effective strategy. They don't have another tool in their toolbox for dealing with you. The first month's end brought a tangible reminder of the change I was implementing. The money that would have gone to my parents remained in my account. I transferred it to a separate savings account Ryan had helped me set up, my future security fund as we called it. Looking at the balance, modest but mine, I felt a curious lightness in my chest. It wasn't happiness exactly, but something adjacent to it. Perhaps it was the first fragile sense of freedom. The real storm broke when the first rent payment due date passed without my contribution. My mother called 17 times in a single day, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. The landlord is threatening eviction, she wailed in the final message. Is that what you want? For your parents to be homeless? I didn't respond directly, but I did call their apartment complex, posing as a potential new tenant, to inquire about their policies. I learned that eviction proceedings wouldn't begin until a tenant was at least 45 days late, and that payment plans were available for tenants in good standing. My parents had options. They simply preferred the one where I paid. The pressure tactics escalated beyond anything I had anticipated. What began as guilt-tripping and emotional manipulation soon evolved into a coordinated campaign to force my compliance by any means necessary. My mother started contacting extended family members with a dramatically altered version of events. According to her narrative, I had suddenly cut them off without warning because of a mental breakdown brought on by job stress. She claimed they were worried about my psychological state and that my financial confusion was a symptom of deeper problems. Your cousin Jennifer called me, Jessica reported during our lunch date. She wanted to know if you were in therapy because your mom told everyone you're having some kind of breakdown. The character assassination wasn't limited to family circles. My sister Heather created several posts on social media that, while not naming me directly, clearly painted me as mentally unstable and financially irresponsible. Some people get a little success and forget where they came from, she wrote in one particularly pointed post. Then they blame their family when their bad decisions catch up with them. The comment section filled with sympathetic responses from mutual acquaintances who didn't know the full story. Several distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly sent me messages expressing concern about my well-being and offering financial advice. The most alarming escalation came when my parents attempted to interfere with my professional reputation. My father called my workplace, asking to speak with my supervisor Michael Thompson about concerns about Allison's decision-making. Fortunately, Michael had been my mentor since I joined the company and knew something of my family situation. Your father called the office today, Michael informed me during our weekly check-in. He implied you might be misappropriating company resources to cover personal financial problems. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's completely false. I've never. Michael held up a hand. I know that, Allison. I've worked with you for 6 years. But I thought you should know they're trying to affect your professional standing. I was simultaneously grateful for Michael's trust and horrified by my parents' willingness to potentially damage my career. When I confronted my father about the call during a rare direct conversation, he was unapologetic. We're trying to get you help, he insisted. You're not thinking clearly, and someone needed to check if there were other problems. The confrontation reached its peak when my parents showed up unannounced at my apartment on a Sunday evening, 3 weeks before the financial support was scheduled to end. I opened the door to find them standing in the hallway, my mother's eyes red from crying, my father's face set in the stern expression he'd used to discipline me as a child. We need to talk sense into you, he said, pushing past me into the living room. This has gone on long enough. For nearly 2 hours, they alternated between berating me for my selfishness and making appeals to family loyalty. Years of resentment bubbled to the surface as they listed all they had supposedly sacrificed for me, while conveniently omitting the graduation betrayal that had catalyzed this change. After everything we did to raise you, my mother sobbed. How can you be so cold? You've given Heather more support in the last 5 years than you've given me in my entire life, I responded, surprised by my own calm. I put myself through college, worked multiple jobs, and then supported all of you. When was the last time you sacrificed anything for me? The question hung in the air, unanswered. If you go through with this, my father finally said, his voice low, you're no longer our daughter. Family doesn't abandon family. It was meant to be the ultimate threat, the nuclear option that would force my compliance. Instead, it clarified everything. I haven't been treated like your daughter in years, I said quietly. I've been treated like an ATM with inconvenient feelings. After they left, my mother launched her final manipulation tactic. She called the following day claiming that the stress of the situation had triggered her blood pressure to dangerous levels. She was in the emergency room, she said, and the doctor was concerned about her heart. I called the hospital directly to check on her condition, only to discover she had never been admitted. When confronted with this lie, she claimed she had been treated and released quickly, a scenario the charge nurse confirmed was highly unlikely for a cardiac concern. This final deception confirmed what I had already begun to accept. The relationship I was fighting to preserve had never truly existed. The people who should have protected me were willing to lie, manipulate, and sabotage my life to maintain their financial control. Despite the intensity of their campaign, I held firm to the boundary I had established. The financial umbilical cord that had tied us together for so long would be severed, regardless of the emotional price. A week after my parents' ambush at my apartment, I received an unexpected email from my cousin Rachel. Rachel was my father's niece, a few years older than me, who had moved across the country after college and maintained only minimal contact with the family. The subject line read, "I know what you're going through. I've been hearing the family gossip about your abandonment of your parents," she wrote. "Let me guess. You finally stood up to them, and now you're the villain of the family story? Been there. We should talk." I was cautious but intrigued. Rachel suggested a video call, and I agreed, curious about what insight she might offer into my increasingly isolating situation. When Rachel's face appeared on my screen, I was struck by our resemblance, the same auburn hair and green eyes that marked us as Montgomerys. Her expression was warm but knowing, without the judgment I'd grown accustomed to from family members. "So," she began without preamble, "you finally escaped the family racket. Good for you." Over the next 2 hours, Rachel shared her own experience with our family's dysfunctional dynamics. 10 years earlier, she had been in a similar position, the responsible cousin who supported her parents financially, while her younger brother received the emotional support and recognition. "Uncle Richard and Aunt Barbara learned their patterns from my parents," Rachel explained. "It's a generational thing in this family, designating one child as the provider and one as the eternal baby who needs protection." Rachel had broken free after a health crisis forced her to reevaluate her priorities. The family's reaction had been nearly identical to what I was experiencing: character assassination, emotional manipulation, and eventual estrangement. "They told everyone I had a nervous breakdown," she said with a hollow laugh. "Really, I just finally developed a backbone." What Rachel shared next stunned me. According to her, my parents had maintained secret savings for years, money they had put aside for Heather's future security while claiming financial hardship to me. "My mom let it slip at a family reunion last year," Rachel said. "She mentioned how clever Aunt Barbara was to have that nest egg for Heather while getting you to cover their expenses. She shut up pretty quickly when she realized I was listening." The revelation should have hurt, but instead, it was oddly validating. The financial investigation I'd begun had been accurate. My support hadn't been going to necessary expenses, but to building a safety net for my sister while I struggled to create my own. Even more revealing was Rachel's information about my graduation day. According to family members who had attended Heather's promotion party, my sister had known about my graduation date for months. The timing of her fabricated celebration had been deliberate, not coincidental. She told everyone she was tired of being overshadowed by her perfect sister, Rachel reported. Your parents went along with it to boost her confidence. The deliberate nature of the betrayal clarified everything. It hadn't been a thoughtless mistake or a difficult choice between competing events. It had been a calculated decision to diminish my achievement and center Heather, as they had done throughout our lives. Beyond information, Rachel offered something I desperately needed: connection. She introduced me to her friend group via a video dinner party the following weekend, people she described as her chosen family. Over virtual wine and takeout, I met others who had navigated similar family dynamics and emerged stronger for it. "We're the Black Sheep Club," explained Rachel's friend Dominic, raising his glass in a toast. "The ones who refuse to set ourselves on fire to keep toxic family members warm." For the first time since the graduation betrayal, I felt truly understood. These people recognized the courage it took to establish boundaries without dismissing the grief that accompanied the process. They validated my experience without requiring detailed justification of my decisions. Rachel connected me with her therapist, Dr. Levine, who specialized in family trauma and estrangement. During our first session, Dr. Levine introduced me to concepts that helped me contextualize my experience. What you're describing has many hallmarks of a narcissistic family system, she explained. The designation of golden child and scapegoat roles, the financial exploitation, the inability to tolerate your independence, these are classic patterns. With Rachel's support and Dr. Levine's guidance, I began to understand that my family's behavior wasn't unique or mysterious. It followed recognizable patterns documented by mental health professionals. The realization was liberating. Their treatment of me wasn't because I was fundamentally unlovable or unworthy, but because the family system required someone to fill the role I had been assigned. As the Thanksgiving holiday approached, the first I would spend without my family of origin, Rachel invited me to join her chosen family's celebration in Chicago. The weekend was healing in ways I couldn't have anticipated. We cooked together, shared stories, played board games, and created new traditions free from manipulation and obligation. Family is supposed to be a safe harbor, not a stormy sea, Rachel's friend Lydia told me as we washed dishes together. Sometimes you have to build your own harbor. Returning to Boston after that weekend, I felt a growing confidence in my decision to maintain boundaries with my parents. The support of Rachel and her friends, now becoming my friends too, provided the emotional sustenance I had always sought from my family of origin. For the first time, I began to envision a future defined by what I wanted, rather than by family obligations and expectations. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. When the 60-day notice period ended and I officially stopped sending money, the full impact of the financial reckoning hit my parents with a force they seemed genuinely unprepared for. Despite the clear warning I had provided, I received a call from Mr. Sanderson, the apartment complex manager, 3 days after their rent was due. "Miss Montgomery, I'm calling about your parents' apartment. They gave me your number as a contact for their rent payment." I took a deep breath before responding. "Mr. Sanderson, I've been helping my parents financially, but I notified them 2 months ago that I would no longer be paying their rent. They should have made arrangements by now." There was a pause on the line. "They indicated you would be handling the payment as usual. They didn't mention any change in the arrangement." This revelation was both frustrating and illuminating. Despite my clear communication, my parents had made no contingency plans, apparently believing I would eventually capitulate as I had during previous attempts to establish boundaries. "I'm sorry for the confusion, but I won't be making any further payments," I said firmly. "My parents are aware of this decision." Mr. Sanderson sighed. "I understand. I'll need to discuss alternative arrangements directly with them." After this conversation, I contacted my attorney, Sarah Walsh, whom I had retained on Ryan's recommendation to help navigate potential legal issues during this transition. Sarah confirmed that I had no legal obligation to continue supporting my parents and suggested documenting all communications in case the situation escalated. The financial reckoning extended beyond housing. My sister Heather, despite her alleged professional success, refused to step in to help our parents financially. According to Rachel, who still had contact with some family members, Heather had claimed she couldn't afford to support them on her limited income, the same income she had previously described as substantial when boasting about her promotion. The truth emerged gradually through family channels. Heather had indeed been terminated from her marketing position shortly after the fake promotion party. She had been living on her savings, likely supplemented by our parents, while job hunting, all while maintaining the facade of career success on social media. Faced with actual financial consequences, my father finally took action. Rachel reported that he had accepted a part-time position at a local hardware store. a far cry from the executive-level position he had claimed to be holding out for, but a step towards self-sufficiency nonetheless. My mother's response was more public and dramatic. She launched what Jessica dubbed a sympathy campaign on social media, posting vague but pointed updates about struggling to keep a roof over our heads and learning who truly cares about family in times of need. Each post garnered supportive comments and offers of help from friends and extended family, many of whom had no idea of the financial support I had provided for years. The most alarming development came 6 weeks after I stopped payments. Ryan contacted me after receiving an alert from the credit monitoring service he had recommended I set up. Someone attempted to open a credit card in your name, he informed me. The application listed your parents' address for the card delivery. The attempted identity fraud was a shocking escalation. The application had been denied due to the credit freeze I had implemented as a precaution, but the intent was clear. My parents had attempted to secure funds in my name without my knowledge or consent. I consulted with Sarah immediately, who advised documenting the incident and filing a police report if there were any further attempts. She also suggested sending a cease and desist letter to make it clear that any further attempts to use my identity would have legal consequences. This crosses the line from family dispute to potential criminal activity, she explained. You need to protect yourself. The attempted financial fraud marked a turning point in my emotional journey. Any lingering guilt I felt about establishing boundaries dissolved in the face of this betrayal. My parents' willingness to potentially damage my credit and financial future confirmed that their concern had never been for my well-being, but for what I could provide. Throughout this period, I continued working with Ryan on rebuilding my own financial security. We created a comprehensive plan to address the years of financial sacrifice, including accelerated retirement contributions, debt reduction, and establishing an emergency fund that was for my emergencies only. Financial recovery isn't just about numbers, Ryan told me during one of our sessions. It's about changing your relationship with money and your beliefs about what you deserve. With the money I had previously sent to my parents, I was able to make significant progress toward these goals. Each month, watching my savings grow and my debt shrink, I felt a strengthening sense of agency over my own life. 3 months after implementing the boundary, I made my first significant personal purchase, a ticket to Europe for a 2-week vacation I had dreamed of for years, but had always deferred as irresponsible while supporting my family. The trip would coincide with the 1-year anniversary of my graduation, a symbolic reclaiming of a milestone that had been tainted by betrayal. As I confirmed the booking, I realized I was smiling, a genuine smile that reached my eyes and lightened something in my chest. The weight of financial obligation that had pressed on me for so long was lifting, allowing me to stand straighter, breathe deeper, and finally look toward a future that belonged truly to me. 5 months after I stopped supporting my parents financially, I received a formal invitation to a family meeting at my grandmother Eleanor's house. The invitation came via certified mail, a level of formality that signaled the seriousness with which my family was approaching this intervention. Your presence is requested to discuss urgent family matters, the card read in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. Sunday, 2 p.m. Full family attendance expected. I called Rachel immediately. Did you get one of these? Yep, she confirmed. The emergency Montgomery summit. Grandmother is pulling out all the stops. We debated whether attending would be productive or merely provide another opportunity for manipulation. Dr. Levine advised that if I chose to go, I should set clear internal boundaries about what I was willing to discuss and have an exit strategy prepared. You don't owe them explanations, she reminded me. You've already communicated your boundaries clearly. After careful consideration, I decided to attend. Avoiding the meeting would only fuel the narrative that I was unstable or unwilling to communicate, and part of me wanted the opportunity to speak my truth to the entire family at once, rather than have it filtered through my parents' distorted lens. Rachel and I agreed to travel together, providing mutual support and a unified front. We met for coffee before driving to my grandmother's suburban home, strategizing how to handle various scenarios that might unfold. "Remember," Rachel said as we pulled into the driveway, "we can leave at any time. We're adults with our own cars and our own lives." The scene inside was exactly as I had expected. The entire extended family was gathered in my grandmother's formal living room: aunts, uncles, cousins, and at the center, my parents and sister. My mother's eyes were conspicuously red-rimmed, a tissue clutched in her hand. My father looked grave, his arm around Heather, who glared at me with undisguised hostility. Grandmother Eleanor sat in her favorite armchair like a monarch presiding over court. At 82, she remained the undisputed matriarch of the Montgomery family, her financial support and approval sought by all her descendants. Her expression was unreadable as Rachel and I took seats near the door. "Now that everyone is here," Grandmother began, "we need to address the situation that's affecting Richard and Barbara's household. Allison has chosen to withdraw financial support from her parents, leaving them in difficult circumstances." The framing was exactly as I had anticipated. I was the villain who had created a problem, not a victim who had finally established healthy boundaries. My Uncle Frank spoke first. "Allison, your parents have supported you your entire life. This is the time when you should be giving back, not abandoning them when they need you." Several other relatives nodded in agreement. The narrative had clearly been established before my arrival. "I have been giving back," I replied calmly. "I've been paying their rent and expenses for 5 years while building my own career." "They raised you," Aunt Patricia interjected. "They put a roof over your head for 18 years. "That's what parents are supposed to do," Rachel said, her voice level but firm. "It's not a loan with interest." The conversation quickly devolved into multiple family members sharing opinions about my obligations and ingratitude. Each speaker seemed to have been briefed with a version of events that painted me as suddenly and inexplicably cutting off support to helpless, loving parents. I listened, maintaining the calm exterior I had practiced with Dr. Wilson, until my father delivered what was clearly intended to be the ultimatum. "We've been patient with this phase of rebellion," he said, "but it's gone on long enough. Either you resume supporting your family as a dutiful daughter should, or we'll have no choice but to consider you no longer part of this family." The room fell silent, all eyes on me. It was the moment of maximum pressure, designed to leverage my greatest fear, abandonment, against my newfound independence. I took a deep breath and spoke directly to my grandmother, whose opinion still carried the most weight in the room. "Grandmother, I'd like to share some information with you and everyone else. For the past 5 years, I've given my parents over $42,000 annually to cover their expenses. During that time, they've misrepresented their actual costs to me, redirected funds to support Heather's lifestyle, and attempted to open credit accounts in my name without my permission." I removed a folder from my bag and placed it on the coffee table. "These are bank statements showing transfers to my parents, alongside documentation of their actual expenses. This is a credit report showing the attempted fraud, and these are messages from my parents acknowledging they deliberately scheduled a fake promotion party for Heather to conflict with my Harvard Business School graduation." A murmur ran through the room as my grandmother picked up the folder and began examining its contents. Her expression remained neutral, but I noticed her hands tightening on the papers as she read. "Is this true?" she finally asked, looking directly at my father. "It's taken out of context," he protested. "We've had expenses Allison doesn't understand, and as parents, we had to make difficult choices about Heather's needs." "That's not what I asked," Grandmother interrupted sharply. "Did you deliberately miss Allison's graduation for a fabricated promotion party? Did you attempt to open credit accounts in her name?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Grandmother turned to my sister. "Heather, if your brother and sister-in-law are facing financial hardship, why haven't you offered assistance?" Heather's confident facade cracked visibly. My situation is complicated right now. My career is in a transitional phase, and she was fired 6 months ago," Rachel interjected. "The promotion never existed." The revelation prompted another wave of murmurs. The carefully constructed narrative was unraveling, and with it, the unified front against me. "I think," my grandmother said after a long moment, "that there has been significant misrepresentation of this situation." She closed the folder and handed it back to me. "Allison has every right to establish financial boundaries. In fact, I'm concerned that she has been exploited for far too long." What followed was unexpected. My grandmother turned to my parents and offered them a proposition. They could move into her guest house, but with conditions. My father would maintain full-time employment, my mother would increase her hours at the dental office, and they would attend financial counseling. "This family has a pattern of enabling dependence," grandmother stated, glancing meaningfully at Rachel and me. "It stops with this generation." As the meeting broke up, various relatives approached me with awkward apologies or curious questions about the real story. I answered politely but briefly, exhausted by the emotional labor of the confrontation. My parents and sister left without speaking to me directly, their unified anger palpable as they exited the house. But something fundamental had shifted. The family mythology had been challenged publicly, the dynamic altered in ways that couldn't be easily reversed. Walking to our cars, Rachel squeezed my arm. "You did it. You stood your ground." I nodded, feeling strangely calm. I did. The victory wasn't about convincing everyone or changing my parents' perspective. It was simpler and more profound. I had spoken my truth without flinching, maintained my boundaries without guilt, and walked away intact. For the first time, I had chosen myself without apology, and the world hadn't ended. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning. 1 year after I stopped financially supporting my parents, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. The most visible change was my new apartment, a bright, airy space overlooking the Charles River that I had selected entirely for my own preferences, without calculating how its cost would affect my ability to support others. The rent was actually lower than what I had been paying my parents monthly, a irony not lost on me. Professionally, I had received a substantial promotion at work. Michael, my supervisor, who had defended me against my father's interference, had become a trusted mentor. Without the constant drain of supporting my family, I could focus fully on my career, taking on challenging projects and leadership opportunities that previously would have overwhelmed my limited energy reserves. "You've been a different person this past year," Michael remarked during my performance review. "More confident, more present. It shows in your work." Perhaps the most unexpected development was my relationship with David, a financial analyst I had met through a professional networking event. Our connection had developed slowly and thoughtfully, both of us bringing past relationship caution to a new beginning. David's patient understanding of my family's situation and respect for my boundaries had been instrumental in helping me learn to trust again. "Healthy love doesn't come with invoices," he told me once after I apologized for setting a boundary. "You don't owe me for caring about you." My contact with my parents had reduced to minimal interactions. After the family meeting at my grandmother's house, they had accepted her offer of the guest house and the conditions that came with it. According to Rachel, who maintained occasional contact, my father had secured steady employment at a marketing firm, not at his previous executive level, but a stable position with benefits. My mother had increased her hours at the dental office as required, though she reportedly complained about it regularly. They occasionally sent me text messages on holidays or my birthday, brief and surface-level communications that avoided any mention of our past financial arrangement or the graduation betrayal. I responded politely but maintained firm boundaries, declining invitations to family gatherings that would place me back in the dysfunctional system I had worked so hard to escape. The most surprising development came 6 months after the family meeting, when my sister Heather contacted me asking to meet for coffee. Against my better judgment, and with Dr. Wilson's cautious support, I agreed. Heather arrived at the cafe looking noticeably different from her social media persona. Her designer clothes and perfectly styled appearance had been replaced by a more modest, authentic look. She seemed nervous, fidgeting with her cup as we exchanged awkward greetings. "I've been in therapy," she finally said after several minutes of small talk. Grandma made it a condition of her helping me with job placement. The admission surprised me. Heather had always rejected any suggestion that she might benefit from psychological support. "It's been eye-opening," she continued. "My therapist has helped me see patterns in our family that I never noticed before. Or maybe I didn't want to notice." What followed was something I had never expected to receive from my sister: an apology. Not a perfect one, with some qualifying statements about her own struggles, but a genuine acknowledgement of her role in the family dynamic that had caused me so much pain. "I knew about your graduation," she admitted, looking down at her coffee, "and I deliberately scheduled my fake party the same day. I was jealous of your success, your independence. It was easier to be the favorite when you were failing." The honesty was refreshing, even as it confirmed the deliberate nature of the betrayal that had catalyzed my boundary setting. Our relationship since that meeting had been cautious but evolving. We met occasionally for lunch, carefully avoiding discussions of our parents or money. It wasn't close friendship, but it was a nascent connection based on more authentic terms than we had ever had before. My own therapy journey with Dr. Wilson continued, focused increasingly on healing childhood wounds rather than managing current crises. I learned to identify and challenge the deeply ingrained beliefs about my worth being tied to productivity and sacrifice. I practiced recognizing and honoring my own needs without guilt or justification. "The goal isn't to never help others," Dr. Wilson explained during one session. "It's to help from a place of genuine choice rather than obligation or fear." This perspective transformed how I approached relationships and giving. I still supported causes and people I cared about, but from a place of conscious choice rather than compulsion. I volunteered at a financial literacy program for young adults, sharing skills that I wished I had learned earlier. I contributed to my grandmother's medical expenses when she needed a procedure not covered by insurance, not because I was obligated, but because I chose to express my gratitude for her ultimate support. The most meaningful marker of my growth came when I received an industry award for a major project I had led. The ceremony was held at a downtown hotel, reminiscent in some ways of my graduation. This time, as I scanned the audience before going on stage, I saw David, Jessica, Rachel, and several colleagues who had become friends, people who supported me without demanding sacrifice in return. Their genuine celebration of my success healed something that had been broken during that solitary graduation walk a year earlier. This time, when I accepted recognition, it wasn't overshadowed by absence and betrayal, but illuminated by authentic connection. As I reflect on the journey from financial exploitation to freedom, I recognize that the lessons have been both painful and precious. I learned that true family is defined by mutual respect and support, not blood relation or obligation. I discovered that boundaries aren't selfish but necessary for healthy relationships. Most importantly, I realized that breaking dysfunctional patterns requires courage but creates space for authentic connection and growth. The relationship with my parents remains complicated, a delicate balance of limited contact and clear boundaries. I don't know if we'll ever fully reconcile or if they'll ever truly understand my perspective. But I've made peace with that uncertainty, focusing instead on building a life that reflects my values rather than their expectations. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most necessary growth. By choosing myself, my financial security, my emotional well-being, my future, I created space for healthier relationships and authentic connections. The price of admission was high, but the freedom on the other side has been worth every difficult step of the journey. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision about setting boundaries with family? What helped you find the courage to prioritize your own well-being? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose themselves sometimes. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your worth isn't measured by what you give to others, but by how authentically you live your own truth.